Welcome. So this week we're going to learn Parshas Mikeitz. Parshas Mikeitz starts Vahi Mikeitz Shnasaim Yomim U'Paroi Choylem. Paroi had a dream 2 years later. 2 years later than what? 2 years after the Sarah Mashkim was released from prison. So this was at the end of Parshas Vayeshev. We have the story of Yosef being in the prison together with the Sarah Mashkim and the Sarah Oifim, and he interprets his dream for him, and he's released. And Yosef says to him that when you're going to go back to your position, Paroi will pardon you, and you're going to go back to your position. When Paroi is gracious to you and is good to you, then you should remember me and tell him that there is this boy, a young man, who's in the prison, and maybe he should be released. He says the second time, he says, you should remember me to Paroi. He says this twice. Now, at the end of the parsha, after the Sarah Mashkim is released, it says, Sarah Mashkim es Yosef, he didn't remember him, Vayishkacheyu, and he forgot him. So Rashi says, Sarah Mashkim boy b'yom, on the day of his release, he forgot him, Vayishkacheyu, he forgot him afterwards. Because Yosef relied on the Sarah Mashkim, that he should tell Paroi about him and get him out of prison, that's why he was punished, and he had to spend 2 more years in prison, and at the end of these 2 years, the whole thing happened with Paras Cholam, where Yosef was called out of prison to interpret it. Now, there's a kasha that everyone asks, that a person has to have betochen, but he also has to do a shtadlus. So why was Yosef punished for doing a shtadlus? He said, when you go there, please, tell Paroi about me, and maybe he can release me from prison. It was a shtadlus. What was the problem? So there's a word which is said from the Balei Musar, that before he said, Im Schartani, if you remember me, his Schartani el Paroi, you can remember me. Why did you say twice? For shtadlus, once would have been enough. Okay. That's Apidar Musar. But over here, Rashi says 2 things. He didn't remember him on the day that he was released, and he forgot him afterwards. Why are these 2 things? He forgot him, period. He forgot him, he didn't remember today, didn't remember tomorrow, didn't remember the next day. Why are these 2 things separated into 2 different forgettings? It's one long forgetting. Why is it 2? So I think that the pshat is that I have to think about it. He told Sarah Mashkim that Paroi is having a birthday, and on the day of his birthday, so he pardons certain criminals, and he's going to take you out of prison. He's going to bring you to the palace, and he's going to pardon you. So when you're there, I want you to tell him that there's I have a prison mate who's probably innocent, and maybe you can get him out. I mean, this is extremely presumptuous. He tells him that he's in there, he thought he's maybe going to get killed, Sarah Oifim got killed, maybe he's going to be executed. And all of a sudden it's a turnaround, and on the birthday, Paroi decides that he's going to pardon him. He should be standing there and falling on the ground and saying, "Oh, thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty. Thank you. And by the way, there's another guy in prison." I mean, what is that? What is that? Okay, so that's one. But later, that's what Yosef said to him. Remember me. Remember me. But then, what happened later? Why don't you, 6 months later, you're back in the king's good graces, you're bringing him these great wines, no flies in the wine, everything is good, and the king is, he's looking at you with he likes you, you're doing a good job for him, And then you say to the king, when I was in prison, then there was a young man there who I think was unjustly accused. Maybe you could look into it and get him released from prison. That would not be inappropriate. On the birthday in the palace, to tell him, but there's this young man in prison, that's inappropriate. But now it's not inappropriate. But there's a different problem. It's embarrassing. Because when you tell this to the king, to Pharaoh, you're reminding him that you did a crime and you were in jail and he only took you out and he pardoned you with the turkeys. But you did something wrong. You committed a crime. So you're reminding him of your crime. It's embarrassing for him to do this. So that's a different thing. So then he has to do something embarrassing. So on the first day, you would have to do something inappropriate. On the second day, you would have to do something embarrassing. So this is what Yosef told them. I want you to remember me. When he pardons you, remind him of me. That was inappropriate. But he asked him anyway. It was inappropriate. But he says, if you don't want to do that, but at least later, maybe you could tell him that I'm in prison. I'll sit here another few months, but at least later, every day is no good. So please do it the first day. It's hard, but listen, I saved your life, so do it the first day. But if you don't want it the first day because you feel it's like way out of place to do that, okay. But then remind them later. When it comes later, you should remind them. So there's two different remindings here. There's the reminding on the first day, which is a problem of inappropriate, and the second day, later, is a problem that it's uncomfortable. It's embarrassing. So that's what Rashi says. The Sar Mashkim decided, even though he promised Yosef that he would do it, okay, so a promise is a promise. He decided that on the day when he's in the palace on the birthday, he's not going to do it. No, I don't want to do it. Later, when he could have done it, but he decided also not to do it because it was embarrassing to him. So, hishtadlus, you have to have a talchim, you have to have hishtadlus. The Chovos HaLevavos says that for hishtadlus, you do normal things. You need parnasa, you get a job. You don't go traveling to Afghanistan to make business because for hishtadlus, you don't do things that are extreme. You do things that are normal. That's hishtadlus. For Yosef to ask the Sar Mashkim to do something inappropriate and to embarrass himself to the king afterwards, that is extreme, and that is a chesron in bitachon. That's too much hishtadlus. Too much hishtadlus. So, what happens? So 2 years pass, and apparently Yosef would have gotten out earlier if he hadn't done this, but he did it. So 2 years pass. And Pharaoh has this dream. He dreams that 7 fat cows and the 7 skinny cows come out, and they swallow the 7 fat cows. Now this was a terrifying dream to him, because I imagine that it was violent. They probably, took bites of the legs, and they ate this and they did that. And he goes, if they would have just gone out, maybe, but it was a very violent dream, and he woke up, and then it says he had this dream, right? And then Vayikas Para, and then he woke up, and then he's sleeping, and he has another dream with the 7 stalks of wheat. It was also like a nightmarish dream. So he woke up and he was all upset. Vayikas Para v'hinei chaloim. And it's chaloim. Avatipam rucha. He was very disturbed. So he called v'yikras kol chartumim Mitzrayim. He called his chartumim. He had on the staff of his palace, he had a team of interpreters, of dream interpreters, and they. This wasn't the only time Pharaoh had dreams. He had dreams, every few days, every week, every day. I don't know. But what did he do when he had a dream? He called his interpreting experts, and they came in. They told him what the dream means. Now this time, he called them in, And they gave him different interpretations, but he didn't like them. He didn't like them. He felt he didn't like them. He didn't accept them. Generally, probably he did accept them, but this time he didn't accept them. So we have to know why. Why didn't he accept them? What was the problem with their interpretations? What was there about the dream that they were missing, that he felt that they weren't doing a good job interpreting the dream? So anyway, he's not happy. Now the Sar Mashkin wakes up and he says that the Chatoya ani masker hayom, because there is Shomi Tonu Nar Ivri, there's this Hebrew young man, and he interpreted the dreams. What does Chatoya ani masker mean? I'm reminding you of my sins, plural. Why is it plural? There's only one sin that we know about, that he let the fly get into the wine. What are the two? The chatoi plural two. So I think pshat in this is that the sin of the fly in the wine is one sin. The other sin is because if he knew of this superstar interpreter in prison, and he didn't tell Pari about it for 2 years, and he was struggling for these 2 years with all these hacks and these regular people who were giving him, low-grade interpretations, and there was somebody sitting in prison that he knew about that could give him a much superior interpretation. That was another sin. So he said, "Chatoy ani masker hayom." I'm confessing that I did 2 sins. I did the original sin for which I was in prison, and I kept quiet for 2 years because I was embarrassed. But now, in the time of emergency, where the king is frantic, he has no interpretation for his dream, I am telling you that I should have told you. I'm telling you now. There's this Nar Ivri in prison. Okay? So Yosef comes out, and Paro repeats the dream to him and tells him the dream. So Yosef interprets it. There's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And then he says a very interesting thing. He says, Va'ata, Yere Paro ish novain v'chacham v'shiseyu al eretz Mitzrayim. Pari should go find an intelligent person. He should appoint him that he should be in charge of Mitzrayim, and he should make officers, and they should collect food, v'yikpetzu, and they make storehouses and store it. So when the famine comes, who asked him for advice? I mean, they pulled him out to interpret the dream. You interpreted the dream. All of a sudden, you've become Paro's lead advisor, his economic advisor. How do you deal with an impending famine? I mean, who asked him? So I think the pshat is like this. It says, Vayikatz Paro, between the 2 dreams, it says that he woke. And then when he told him, when he says, later, when he tells him the second dream, he says, I had the dream with the cows, va'ikatz. And he tells Yosef that he woke up. Va'ere b'chalaymi, and I continued dreaming. Doesn't say that he went back to sleep. Va'ikatz va'ere b'chalaymi. So the Rashbam says that va'ikatz doesn't mean that he came fully awake. It means that he came to a different level of consciousness. So, I can only talk about my own dreams, but sometimes I'm having a nightmare. Par's having a nightmare, so I'm making up this nightmare. I'm just giving you an example. You're having a nightmare that you're driving a car, and you hit the brakes, and they don't work, and the car is out of control, and you're going down these roads, and you're trying to stay on the road, and you're afraid you're going to hit that wall, and then you come to the cliffs, and maybe you're going to go over the cliff, and what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're about to die. And then in the dream, you realize that this is a dream. You say, this has happened to me more than once, but not in this case. And I say, it's a dream. So, okay, I'm in control. So I'm gonna move off this dream. I'll go dream about something else. So that's the end of the car chase and the car. It's the end. I can get away from it. I can go somewhere else. You have a certain amount of controls on your dreams if you're aware that you're dreaming. If you're not aware, then you feel that you're out of control. There's nothing you can do. What are you going to do? So Pharaoh said vayikotz, or vayikotz. That means he in the dream, he realized that it's a dream. He realized it. And then he continued dreaming. And he went to a different dream, and the different dream was also a nightmare. So he said there was a dream, and there was, and I had a moment of awareness within my dream that I'm in a dream, and that I could switch the channel. And then it continued, and the other dream was also a nightmare. So Yosef told him, so why did you have two dreams? Yosef told him, because Hashem wants to tell you this is going to happen. But Yosef, nobody interpreted the va'ikotz. That moment that he felt that I can get out of this and I can switch to a different dream, that moment, all his interpreters did not interpret that piece of his dream. And that's why he wasn't satisfied. But Yosef said to him, this is what it means. You're going to have 7 good years, and then you're going to have 7 years of famine. And va'ikotz, you know what va'ikotz means? That there is something you could do, that you could take a ish chacham v'navon. Va'ikotz means chacham v'navon, like you see in the Haftorah by Shloima. Va'ikotz v'nei chaloim, that in the chalam Hashem gave him chachma, and he woke up and he's able to understand the language of the birds. So va'ikotz is telling you, you have to find somebody who is a chacham, and who is going to take control of the country, and it's going to set it up that you will not starve during the years of famine. That's what he was saying. He wasn't being presumptuous and saying that, now that you called me to be an interpreter, I'm also going to be an advisor. No, he was interpreting the dream. The va'ikotz moment that you had, that va'ikotz moment means that you have to get a smart person to control the production of the land, and to make sure that you have enough food stored away that you will be able to get through the famine without starving. That's what Yosef did. Now, you find a similar thing this va'ikotz moment in Parshas Vayetze. So Yaakov has a dream. The sulam is going up to the sky, and Hashem talks to him. And vayikotz Yaakov v'shnasai. Yaakov woke up from his sleep. I mean, he was having a nevuah. It wasn't just a sleep. He woke up. And Rashi says, "V'anoichi," he says, "Vayikotz v'shnasai. Ochen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. V'anoichi lo yadati." I didn't know. So Rashi says, "She'im yodati lo yeshanti b'makom kadosh kazeh." If I knew that this was such a holy place, I never would have gone to sleep here. Then it says, after that, 2 psukim later, V'yashkem Yaakov b'boker. He got up in the morning, which sort of gives the impression that he went back to sleep. If he would not have slept there, why did you go back to sleep? So you could say pshat. You could, and maybe that's the pshat, that he woke up. He did not go back to sleep. He stayed up a whole night in the dark. V'yashkem, as soon as it got light, V'yashkem Yaakov b'boker. His reason that as soon as it got light, right away, he went and he made the matzeva. You could say this. But the Pashto Pshat in the Pasuk seems to be that he went back to sleep. But the answer is that vayikos doesn't mean he came wide awake. He came to an awareness in his dream. Vayikos, he realized that this is a holy place. That was his vayikos moment. But he was still in the nevuah, and he didn't wake up. But later, vayashkem Yaakov. So, there's a lesson to be learned from this in Parah, that people in their own lives, sometimes life could become nightmarish. You could be stuck in a situation and it's just, you don't see your way out, and things are bad, and they're getting worse, and you just feel For instance, let's say a person's in a business, and the business is not working. So he borrows more money and he invests it and he does this and he does that, and he keeps it, and he keeps pushing at it and pushing at it and pushing at it, and it's a nightmare. He can't sleep, he can't eat, he's fighting with his wife. It's a nightmare. But you could have a Vayikotz moment. You could say, this is a nightmare. I don't have to be living this. Whatever it is, I'm going to make a change. It's not working, it's a nightmare. I have to make a change. And then you make a change, whatever change you make. Maybe you sell your business, or you give it up, or maybe you do something else. I mean, there are many, many things. Just using a business as a simple example, but there's all kinds of things. People in their professions, in their learning. Maybe you're learning a certain type of limud, and it's not doing it for you. And maybe you should make a change and learn something else. Maybe if you're not enjoying to learn lamdus, maybe you should learn halacha. If it's not working, if you're in the rut and your life is just like, you're just not enjoying it. You're supposed to enjoy your life, and you're supposed to feel good about it, and you're doing and doing and doing, and it's not good. So then make a switch. But to make a switch, you need a Vayikotz moment. You need to have a moment of an epiphany. You need to have a moment where you say, I have to change this. And when you do that, there's a good chance you will be matzliach. A good chance you'll be matzliach. You're in the wrong place, change it, find something else, and you'll be matzliach. This is what happened on Hanukkah. What was the first instance of religious persecution in the history of the world? That means the persecution of a religion, not of a religious people. To attack a religion and ideology. The first case was the Yevonim. Before that, Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was he attacked Chalitz, he attacked Eretz Yisrael, destroyed the Beis Mikdash, brought everybody into exile, and then he called you in and said, you have to bow down to my Avodah Zarah. That was political. He didn't care. He said, you could keep Shabbos, you could do whatever you want. He provided kosher food for Daniel and for Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the palace. He had no problem. The pagans were very, very tolerant. You have a religion, I have a religion, fine, no problem. But when you're here, in my country, in my palace, you pay homage to my God. So that's not because he wanted to convert you to that. You just have to bow down to my God. You bow down to me, bow down to my God. That's what he wanted. So he was not persecuting the religion. He was not out to destroy the Torah. He was out to dominate the Jewish people. That's what he wanted to do. And that was in general the situation in the ancient world. But when it came to the Yevonim was a different thing. The Yevonim, they went beyond the Avodah Zarah. They went to Kfira. They didn't. The Avodah Zarah by the Greeks were a joke. I mean, if in the I'm not going to get into that. They kept the Avodah Zarahs for the cultural aspect. They had the celebrations and the festivals. But if you read the literature of the Greeks, they made fun of the gods. They didn't believe in this anymore. They went to Kfira. That was secular humanism. That was the Greeks. Secular humanism is very much in contrast with the Torah. Avodah Zarah could tolerate the Torah. Why not? You want to do that? Do that. Secular humanism is a worldview, it's an ideology, and it is a stira to the Torah. So they went out to destroy the Torah. They went to attack the ideology. They went to attack the religion. Now, how did they do this? They did it by 1,000 cuts like the Chinese do. They first, no Mila. Okay, fine, but everything else you could do. So people say, do the terrible, terrible gzeira, but what can you do? So you adapt it, fine, no Mila. Next, I don't know what the order was. I don't remember offhand what it was. Then you can't keep Shabbos. But okay, you mistake with the situation. You adjust. Fine, okay. We're living, and then no Rish Chodesh. No Rish Chodesh messes up the whole entire calendar, messes up all the Yom Tovim. But what can you do? We have, and then to boil that a kala has to go first to the bishop, but one step after another, and each one, terrible, but you have no choice, you accept it, and then the next step, and the next step, and they were eroding. They didn't just make a frontal attack on the Torah. They attacked it by erosion. We cut off a little piece, and then another little piece, and another little piece, until the whole thing is destroyed. That's what they were doing. And it was a national nightmare. It was a nightmare. They were in this nightmare, and inexorably, the Greeks were destroying the Torah. Until the sister of Chashmonaim got up, that the Medrash says, and she says, do you want this to happen to me? Is this what you want? And then the Chashmonaim had a va'ikotz moment. They said, no more nightmare. No more. We're gonna change. We can't do this anymore. We're gonna change. And then they went and they revolted, and the Rebbeinu Shalom gave them hatzlacha, and they won. And that was what happened in Hanukkah. Hanukkah was the result of a very great va'ikotz moment for Klal Yisrael. And this is on the national scale, but on the personal scale, people also need to have va'ikotz moments when they are in a situation which is nightmarish and it's not providing them with their needs. Then you have to have a va'ikotz moment. I'd like to include with just a couple of small observations. It says, Vayikru Parei Shem Yosef Tzofnas Paneach. Parei named him Tzofnas Paneach. So he gave him a different name. But if you turn the page, well, in this Chumash at least, it says, Vayomer Parei L'chol Mitzrayim L'chu El Yosef Asher Yomer Lechem Tasu. Go to Yosef, and so his name was Yosef. What's Tzofnas Paneach? What was his name? So again, we come to what we spoke about in Parshas Vayishlach, that Rachel called when Binyamin, she called him Ben Aini, and Yaakov called Binyamin. So why did he change the name? So I pointed out then that Onkelos does not translate names, but he does translate Ben Aini. It says Bar Devai. So it says Shmai Ben Aini, but doesn't mean that his name was Ben Aini. She just said, "This is the child of my sorrow. This is the child of my sorrow." She didn't give him a name. Yaakov gave him the name. Over here also, V'yikra Parei Shem Yosef Tzofnas Paneach. The Onkelos doesn't say Tzofnas Paneach. V'kro Parei Shum Yosef Gavra de Metamrin Galionle. The person to whom the hidden things are revealed. So he was just saying that he is, is just like a sobriquet. He's given him a title. Like you say, oh, this person, he's the Chesed man. I called him the Chesed man. Doesn't mean that his name is Chesed man. It's just, that's what we call him. So Yosef is called Tzofnas Paneach, the person who knows secrets that nobody else would know. That's what he called him. But his name was Yosef. And he didn't change his name. And he told him that when you go to Yosef. Okay, so then Yosef did his job. Vayizbar Yosef bar. Tremendous amount. Ad ki chodal lispar, until they stopped counting. Ki chodal, he means the one who was counting. The accountant stopped counting. Kein mispar, because he couldn't count it. What is the tool l'shaynes? Ad ki chodal lispar, kein mispar. What are these two things? So I think it's simple, but I asked a number of people to see if it really is simple, then I wouldn't say it. But since the people I asked didn't know, and they were intelligent people, so I think it's good to say. What he's saying is this. I once read in a book that the Hottentots of Africa, the primitive tribe in Africa, this goes many, in the old times. I guess the Hottentots today all have laptops, but the Hottentots in the old times, they could count to 3, and they couldn't count beyond 3. Anything beyond 3 was a lot. They didn't have, the number 4 didn't exist in their language. So therefore, they could only count to 3. So what he's saying here is, Ki ein mispar, they didn't have the number in the language. The Egyptian language didn't have the number. They had thousands of millions, but they didn't have trillions and billions. They didn't have that. Today, we have the ability to express any number. Of course, we'll say 10 to the 100th power. But we're not going to say trillion. But we say that we have a way in our language and our grasp of mathematics, we have a way of expressing astronomical numbers. We have a way of doing this. But the Egyptians didn't have it. Ein mispar, there was no number. How can you count? We ran out of numbers. That's what Rashi says. Kein mispar, lefi she'ein mispar. They didn't have numbers. So, one more thing. It says that when the brothers came, vayisnakir aleihem vaydaber itom koshes. He made himself like a stranger to them, and he spoke harshly to them. So Rashi says, Nasa lahem k'nochri b'dvarim. He spoke to them as a stranger would speak, not as a brother, and he spoke to them harshly. So that's how Rashi explains the pasuk. Onkelos says something else. Obviously, I like to look at Onkelos a lot. He thought about what to say to them, and he spoke to them harshly. And the Vayisnakar Aleim means that he withdrew from them. When you're having a conversation, then you're engaged, and you talk and I talk and you talk and I talk. But sometimes in the conversation you have to withdraw a little bit and think, okay, so what should I say here? So this is how Onkelos learns the pasuk. Vayisnakar Aleim, he withdrew and he thought, what should I say? And then he said koshes. So what does this mean? It's mean like this. This must have been a very emotional moment for Yosef. Finally his brothers are here, they sold him, and he's here, and he's the king, and his chacham is being fulfilled, and he has resentments. We saw at the end that they thought he was going to kill them. At the end of Vayeshi, they begged him not to kill them, and he did have resentments. He didn't talk to them in the last years. He didn't have anything to do with them. So there was a lot of emotion involved. Yosef did not want to answer them from a place of emotion. He is right now, the dream is being fulfilled, and he has an obligation. There was a plan, whatever his plan was, to return it and this and that, and get his father down. We're going to get into the plan right now. But he had a plan, and the plan had to be done with Yeshuva Das. He had to think, what is the right thing to do? What is the right thing to say? And he stopped, and he thought, what should I say? Put my emotions aside, and he spoke to them harshly, but this harshly didn't come from a place of anger, it came from a place of reason. This is what has to be done. At this point, I need to speak to you in this way. That's how Onkelos learned this pasuk. Thank you very much, and Freilich Chanukah, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you.